You know, technology is such that it's driving us farther away from each other and making us more insular. And that's not necessarily a good thing. We need community. We're just creatures like that. We need each other.
They might not be completely on board with it, but they're already too far down. They're just like, I guess we'll just keep going.
Their expenses start getting way higher than their income is, and then just put it on a credit card, and then, oh shit, you still got to go back and pay that credit card debt.
Yeah.
And then the debt just starts amounting to it.
Yeah. Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Totem Podcast. I'm your host, Monico Carrillo, but of course, we got here
Erick Carrillo, I'm your guys' the co-host here on the show. But guys, like always, remember, we are on YouTube right now, but then we're also on all the other podcast streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all that stuff. So if you're on there, give us a follow. If you're on YouTube, give us a subscribe button. And if you guys like what we're doing here on the show, having very interesting guests on, give this video a thumbs up, especially if you like today's guest, which I'm sure you guys will. But with that, guys, I invite you to the podcast where an act of rebellion is the question.
We're bringing the energy today, Eric. This person's lit up with energy. We need to get some energy to get off of her onto us. Stephnie Hancock, how are you doing?
I'm awesome, guys. I'm great.
Appreciate you for coming out here, hanging out with us today.
Yes, thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. I like when like minds come together and have a really good conversation.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So, for the people that don't know you, could you give us a quick, brief background of like who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Stephnie Hancock, and I've been in Colorado probably since 1978. I know that might age me a little bit, but I'm proud of it. Okay, let me put that out there. I was in the military. I came here with the Air Force, and I was stationed at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I was in the band, and I joined an elite group of people at that time because there were just scattered bands throughout the country, and you had to audition to be part of those bands. And so for me, I was in the Colorado Springs Air Force Academy Band, and I was a frontline singer for the Falconeers Jazz Band and Moods in Blue, which is an orchestra group. They did like show tunes, Broadway songs, stuff like that. And we would go around and do recruitment gigs at the high schools to, encourage kids to join the military. I was in the Blue Steel Rock Band, so we would go around, play covers of the latest songs, and the kids thought it was so cool. And it's like, okay, here's a way for you to join the Air Force, and maybe you could be in the band. See, that's what they told me when I joined.
That's how they get you.
That's how they got me. Okay, it was a trick because I joined the band. I joined the Air Force, and it was 3 years before I actually got into the band. So I worked in military airlift command and supply. So I supplied parts to airplanes for 3 years, and then I auditioned for the band. I was like, man, I got took. These guys played me.
So they wouldn't let you audition, or how did
well, you could audition, but they didn't necessarily pick you. So, and there were some people, like my husband, he was in the NORAD band. He came directly into the Air Force and straight into the band. So like in the 70s, well, Glenn Miller, let me just roll back a little bit. Glenn Miller, in the Mood, big band era, he was the one who started the Army Air Corps Band. And so a lot of folks who were musicians, they would join the Air Force or the Army and go straight into the band because they were musicians first and foremost. They were not fighters. And so they would use those guys to go around and play for the troops. And so that let them keep their chops up. They could still play and then fulfill their obligation for service. And so it just came, just tarried on after that. And so that's kind of how I got here. And I met my husband here, and I love Colorado. To me, I love the fact that it was an undiscovered country at the time. Now everybody's discovering it and they're coming here. So I'm like, Don't come. There's nothing to see here. Go back to your place of origin. I got greedy and selfish with it.
Hey, first of all, I forgot to tell you thank you for service.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It was the best time in my life. And for me, I know that the perception and the popularity of the military ebbs and flows. Like right after 9/11, people joined in droves because it's like, America, yeah, let's go get them, And then now it's that climate sort of changed a little bit with some of this some of the attitudes of what's happening in the country right now. The military can be a plus or a minus, but for me, it was an opportunity growing up in the inner city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to change my life, change my direction, and to have an opportunity that I wouldn't otherwise have. Back when I was in school, it was either you get married, you have kids, or you go to college. None of those things were an option for me. And I joined the military because I wanted to leave home but still be safe. Because, the military still tells you what to do, but you're protected and you get training. And that's what I was looking for, opportunity to be a girl, to, change my life. I mean, growing up in the inner city was tough. And to be able to see an out and to take it, I mean, that takes courage. I was only 17. So my mom had to sign for me to go in. And it was really tough. But I did it, and it was the best decision I ever made. And I always tell young people, if you don't know what you want to do and you're still trying to figure it out, if I were queen of the forest, I would say that every person who lives in this country should do at least 2 years of either military service or something like Job Corps or Peace Corps, to go to a different place than you know about. If you grew up on the East Coast, send you to the West Coast. If you grew up in the South, send you to the North. So you would have an idea of what this country is, because a lot of times we live in these small microcosms. This is our little world. And I know people who haven't left the 9 blocks of their neighborhood their entire life. So how do you understand what the world is if you've never left it, if you've never been able to explore it and understand that there are people who think like you and there are people who don't? And so for me to be able to see the world and travel, it changed my perspective. And it made me really appreciate how great this country is and how fortunate I am to be here.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we talk about all the time here on the podcast too, is trying to tell people to it's good to get out from where you're born and raised, just to get other perspectives. Even if it's just 2 hours away or something, especially if it's a small city, a small town like this, or a bigger city like Denver's, go back and forth, so you can experience those different things. Because if you just stay where you grew up, you're not gonna ever experience or have any different type of perspective on anything else.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And it changed my life, and it broadened my horizons. And because I gave them 6 years, they gave me 4. I went to college. I mean, I was the first person in my family to go to college and to graduate from college. That's so awesome. It meant a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk about some projects you have going on, because it seems like you have your hands full with all these projects you're in. So talk to me about some of the projects. What do you have going on right now? What's the biggest one?
Wow, I've got, how you ask your kids what are you doing, and they're twirling plates and their feet are going, oh, nothing, throw one more thing on there. Well, I am president of the Aurora Cultural Arts District. I've always been, as I said before, being in the band, I've always been interested in art and theater and culture and music and all of those things. And in Aurora, we have a district called the Aurora Cultural Arts District. It's in the 80010 and 11 zip code. It is the most culturally diverse but economically challenged area in Aurora, Northeast Aurora. We have over 90 spoken languages, a high refugee immigrant community. And so we want to celebrate art and culture in our community and elevate artists to make a living wage. That is our mission. And you can go to auroraculture.org and look on our website. We have a lot going on. We do free events. We took a 90-year-old liquor store and turned it into an art gallery.
That's awesome.
And we feature local artists, people from Aurora or even in the greater Colorado area, but we started with Aurora artists. And we had a big grand opening. It was great. Our studio is 800 square feet. It's really small. But we have 6 movable walls, so we can hang.
Customize it.
Yes, yes. So we can move the walls around. We had 6 artists. They each submitted 5 pieces of art, and we had over 300 people show up in our little studio, and it was fantastic. Wow. We're running an exhibit right now, a color exhibit, and we have 5 artists in there right now with original work. And the idea for us is we want them to sell every piece of art they hang in our gallery, which is huge, because when you're an artist in the visual world, you kind of have to know the secret handshake sometimes to get into some of these galleries. And our perspective is that if you're here in Aurora, we want to celebrate you and give you the opportunity to show your proof of concept so people can see your work. And who knows, someone out of our ranks may become famous and we could say they started with us first. But we do free events as well. We have an event on the second Saturday of every month on East Colfax called Colfax Art Jams. And we do it from April to September every year. And each month has a different theme. And it's on the second Saturday from noon to 4. So as I said before, we were on East Colfax. So we just call it the facts. It is what it is, right? We're like a diamond in the rough. But when you dig a little deeper, you'll find the beauty of what our community is. So this next theme is going to be Taste the Facts. So we're going to have food from different countries. And we're going to have artisans and crafters and people selling stuff, and we're going to have a band called Uncle Beef. I have to say it like that. Uncle Beef's band, and they're a rock band, and they're really good. They're really good, and they have a following, and people will come, and it's free. It's open to the public. You just come and bring your money and buy stuff and try food, because we have probably 20 or so different restaurants from different countries in our district. Okay. We have people, Burma, Vietnamese, Sinhalese, African, Ethiopian. We have this amazing Vietnamese bakery called Bon and Butter. Yum, yum, yum. They have the best croissants ever. And then right next door we have Baba and Pop's pierogies. So, I mean, we've got all kinds of food and flavor. And
a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. And you just have to come down and experience it. And it's fun and it's free and it's great. Mm-hmm.
That's great. How'd you get intertwined with all that?
Well, I owned a theater company, and I since I came back to Denver back in the 80s, I belonged to several theater companies. One was Eulipians. It was a great African-American theater company. I played with them for a few years, and then I moved over into the Arts District in Aurora, and I realized, a lot of times, like, this podcast comes out of a need. I created, along with two partners, 5280 Artists Co-op, which was a theater company with two friends out of a need. I was seeing that roles for people who look like me there weren't any. We would be like background, or we'd be in the chorus or the choir, or we'd be walking. We never had any speaking roles, much less leading roles. And then as you got older, there were even less. There are lots of musicals, which required a lot of dancing and jumping. I don't do dancing and jumping anymore. So, you really wanted to be able to have some roles that spoke to that. So we created 5280 Artists Co-op to tell unique stories from a unique perspective. Not preaching to people, but making them think about things. And we specialized in 15-minute microplays. So we would do one night, 6 plays. It was 2 acts, 15-minute plays, 3 in the first act, 3 in the second act. We did one play called Don't Hate Me 'Cause I'm Beautiful. And it was, let me just roll back a little bit. We had a guy, I opened up to the entire country, send me scripts, 15-minute scripts, and we'll do plays. I read over 200 scripts, and out of 200, we narrowed it down to 6. It was quite an adventure to do that.
That's got to take some time.
It did. Yeah. We did staged readings. We did some I just off rip. I was like, nope. And then others, we narrowed it down to like 25. And then we had a staged reading, had everybody come, we read them, and then we voted. And we were like, we like these, we don't like that one, maybe next year. And then we picked 6. And this one play we picked was Don't Hate Me 'Cause I'm Beautiful. It were 6 animals. People as animals. So we had a bird, a rat, a cat, a dog, a hippo. No, it was 5, and a hippo. So, okay, cats and rats don't typically get along. Dogs and birds, and then the hippo, he was just out there. He was just there. And it really talked about how we look at each other and make snap judgments. It happens all the time without even knowing who that person is. And to have these folks dressed up as these animals, the rat was very debonair. He had a cane and a top hat. He was very, He was great. And the cat looked like a cat. I mean, it was really funny, but it was very profound because it talked about how we make snap judgments about people and how, regardless of how they look, there's something more inside if you take about 5 minutes to see it. People laughed and then they went, oh. And that was our point, to get you to think about what are the preconceived, everybody's prejudiced. So when folks say, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist, I'm not whatever, you are. You are. You have your own prejudices, you have your own biases. When you know, there are people that you'll hang out with and people that you won't. You know, there are people that rub you the wrong way and people that don't. So it really challenged that notion and to help you to accept it. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it can protect you. But you have to understand that we're all people and we're trying to evolve and to grow and to love each other and to accept each other where we are. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, that's awesome. I like it. I like the details and stuff. But
yeah.
You've always been artistic, right? Because I was seeing that you started singing when you were 9.
I had my first profession. Well, I got candy, but I started singing when I was 5.
Just do an exchange for service.
Yes.
That's still professional.
You give me cake. That's right. Capitalism. That's what we did at a young age. And my aunt, I come from a singing family, so we didn't necessarily play instruments. Like my husband's family, they all played instruments. We were all singers. I had an uncle that sang. He had a soprano voice, even when he was an adult. And so we would all sing together and like that. And so we've always had that kind of thing going on. So that's how the Air Force got me with the band. But you know, I've always wanted to have the opportunity to do something creative. But, you know, when I went to college, my mom said, get a college degree so you could get a real job. Which is like musicians and artists are not, because they don't really have real jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, so I got a degree in broadcast communications and
How did that go?
Loved it, huh?
Oh, it was awesome. Some of the worst jobs I ever had was in broadcast communications. I worked at a local television station here. It was the worst experience of my life.
Was it the people that you worked with, or was it you just didn't like it?
Primarily the people, because the environment was such that I could see where you could take it somewhere, but you know, in those kind of environments, they have expectations of how they think you should be, and if you don't meet that, then you're not going to move. You're going to stay right here. And so I like radio better than I like TV. Because there's not that pressure on how you're supposed to look, because there's no way I could go on TV with a shaved head now, but back in the 80s, no. You know, it just wasn't happening.
It's crazy. It's also more just like you're just like kept in this box. You can't really be yourself, be able to express yourself like you could on radio.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or two, we're talking about it. We've talked about it before, but. So if I'm talking with someone just over the phone, you know, they're like, "Oh, cool, you know, everything's good," and then I show up and they're like, "Oh, like you're Hispanic," because I feel like I do, but I guess I don't. Like have an accent when I talk, so I can easily be talking Spanish and then go to English and back and forth, and keep the accents. I think all right, but it's weird how people like we go back to the
preconceived notions that people have, because it's happened to me quite a bit. And, you know, because of the way I speak, people didn't know who I was until I showed up too. And it's like, and it would just tickle me because I'm like, and you can see it, even though they're trying to hide it. And you're like, you didn't expect to see me coming, did you? And it just cracks me up. So that's why I like working radio better. And it's just... You kind of, the way things are a lot different now, but back in the day, not so much.
It was a little different.
Yeah, it was a lot different. And so, you know, sometimes it forces you to create your own opportunities, which is what we did. We created our own opportunity. We were nominated for 3 Henry Awards, which is kind of like Tonys, but for the local. And we won one. And we won up against Denver Center of Performing Arts, which is a huge powerhouse in the Denver community as far as art and plays and like that. And for us, a little 3-woman company, to win up against DCPA, that was huge.
Yeah, it has to be huge because I'm pretty sure they probably have tons of funding for it too. So.
Yes, they have tons of funding, and we had about a $5,000 budget. So, I mean, to go up against somebody who had tens of thousands and then our little budget, it was really satisfying to see that you don't need a lot of money, just a good idea and people who are willing to put in the work to make it happen. And so once I started working with those guys, I realized you've got to be able to impact policy and culture in a way that's positive. We can make the art all day long, but if there's no mechanism for you to get it out and to support it, then that's a problem. And so I realized it was important to have a seat at the table, to work with some of the community organizations, funders, folks who had access to areas that we didn't, just to not only help me. This is great if it's helping me, but I want to create legacy and something that someone can use long after I'm gone. And I know people think, oh, I'm going to be around here forever. No, you're not. Eventually you will be old. And what are you going to have? What are you going to leave behind? And so that's when I started getting involved in the arts district, and I realized that it was struggling. People were disconnected. They didn't. Everybody was trying to go for what they know, and they were in silos. And we're still. It's an ongoing effort. It's like herding cats. You have to pull people together and say, this is how it's going to benefit you, and ultimately benefit all of us. And if we're able to get funding and resources, exposure, marketing dollars, all those things we need to elevate this area that people think is blighted, and have forgotten it, basically, to say, look, the Aurora Cultural Arts District is an arts and culture destination. We want you to come here and experience the uniqueness of what it is. We're not trying to turn it into 5 Points, which makes me sad. A friend of mine has a tea shop down on 21st and Welton, but it's surrounded by these big, giant apartment buildings. And she's like a little tiny tea shop around. It's totally been gentrified, and it hurts because it's like the uniqueness of what this community is has totally been covered over. And so on that strip of East Colfax from Dayton and Colfax up to Galena and Colfax, it's it's funky. It's funky, but they've been putting up murals. We've got paintings. We've got a few little restaurants, and they're working their way down to kind of keep the culture and the authenticity of what it is, but not turn it into something that you don't recognize. And that's what I've been trying to work towards. And in the tempestuous relationship that I currently have with the city, it's trying to change the mindset of people to realize this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Is that kind of why you decided to kind of like start getting into politics, to kind of like be able to help and give back more to the community?
It is.
Because now you're running, so for all you guys, running for Ward 4?
Ward 4 on the Aurora City Council, which is actually my neighborhood.
Okay.
I've lived in Ward 4 since 1997. My kids went to the local middle school and high school, so I have deep roots and invested interest in the community. And I realized, to your point, that if you're not able to impact policy, if you're not able to have a seat at the table, then you'll be on the menu. So I decided I didn't want to be on the menu, that I wanted to take action to help make life better for our communities, because Aurora is a city at a crossroads. We have so much opportunity, so much potential, but we also have some unique and serious challenges, not unlike other communities, but Aurora, unlike Denver, is growing out. We're growing outwards. And so for me to see the economy grow, to see people feel safe, to put a handle on some of the affordability issues that we have, homeless issues. I believe in freedom versus force. I believe in economic empowerment and opportunity. I believe that the government's role is to protect individual rights, not to tell us what to do. You're a grown-up. You know how you want to live your life. I don't want the government coming in telling me what to do. And I think we have gotten to the place where we've gotten so used to governmental agencies telling us things that we think that that's how life should be. And I'm old enough to know that, no, that's not how life should be. If you want autonomy, then you have to earn it. You have to work for it. You have to ensure that it continues, because if you're not watchful, then you'll wake up and then it'll be something that you don't recognize.
Yeah, a little bit to throw a little counter argument at you. Like, so then people would be like, they want the government to kind of, because they get money from the government. So they kind of...
They become too reliant on the government.
They're reliant.
Like, okay, keep telling me what to do then, because I still need some more
It's too
help.
hard to turn back around.
Yes.
It's too hard to turn that shit back around.
Yeah.
So they're just like, they say this, I feel like they might not be, correct me if I'm wrong, they might not be completely on board with it, but they're already too far down. They're just like, I guess we'll just keep going.
Yes. That's a slippery slope. It's like, the visual I like to use is a Venus flytrap, right? So it's open.
Which is of those?
It's a carnivorous plant.
Okay.
So this Venus flytrap is here, and it has a delicious odor that draws people to it, and they're on the edges, on the periphery, enjoying the deliciousness, and then suddenly it's closed. This is how I see the government right now in some ways. We have, since the 1960s, we have been slowly manipulated and addicted to what government can do in the name of urban renewal, of financial equity, which is a thing that does not exist, to raise the level of living, standard of living for everyone. When in fact, if you look historically, I think it was on the upswing anyway. And if anybody's ever read any Thomas Sowell, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because he's an economist who really rails against governmental interference with how the economy of scale, how economies go. But people had gotten used to the government saying, okay, we got the FDA, which is an illegal organization, but I won't go there. They say, we're going to protect your food and make sure it's good. And you're like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Well, okay, so now we're going to protect the, the vaccinations and things like that to make sure they're okay. And you're like, okay. Well, we're going to make sure that you have a good house and that it's safe for you to live in. Okay. And we keep saying, okay. And before we know it, we're agreeing to things that on the surface seems like they're okay, but let's look at that. Okay, we want to make sure that your house is okay. So we're going to institute regulations, laws, and ordinances on builders to keep them from building shoddy property. That sounds great. Okay, as a result of that, there are fines, there are permits, there are all kinds of paperwork and things like that you have to fill out, and before you know it, the cost goes up.
And not just fill out, pay for the permit.
That's right. That's right.
And then they tax the permit.
They tax you. So after they do all that, who's gonna pay for all those permitting and the taxes and the fees and the filing of the paperwork? Who ends up paying for that?
People.
That's a good question. It should be the people. I don't know. You tell.
It's the purchaser.
Okay.
So when a guy comes to town, he says, I'm going to build 25 houses, and the cost to me to build these houses just on the baseline is $100,000. That sounds good. And then the government says, well, we're going to need to make sure that only electric is in this house. So that's going to cost you extra $20,000. It is, and After that, we're going to make sure that all the electricity is to our code. So we need you to file paperwork for that. So that's going to cost another $20,000. And we need to make sure that the plumbing goes to the cisterns that go to the reservoir. And so for that, to drill all that plumbing, that's going to cost you another $20,000. So now, and this is just really high overview, right? So now the house that was originally $100,000 is now $160,000 to the builder. This is before they put one brick, one hole in the ground, anything, right? And so, of course, if it rains and the wood gets ruined, then there's a cost overrun. So then they've got to pay another $20,000 to get replacement wood. So now this house that was originally $100,000 is now $180,000. Now they get it done. If nothing else bad happens, the house is sitting there on the block waiting for people to come because people need housing, right? So now they have to add in the cost. So now the house is $180,000. And of course the realtor, they have to get paid for selling the house. So that's another $20,000. So at the end of the day,
seems like we're in a Ponzi scheme to me.
So you're the person who's going to pay $180,000 plus dollars for a house that really originally cost $100,000. So they're not eating this cost. You're paying it, and it happens a lot everywhere all the time.
But the I guess something that people would say, like, I guess if they do have to get, like, the permits and I guess regulations for it, then I guess they're not just buying, like, a shady house, I guess, that has no regulations.
Yeah, it's some level of, like, standards. So, like, okay, this is basic, so it's going to be at least livable.
Yes.
There's some shady builders out there.
Yes, there are.
Just wire everything. Like, I'll tell you just personally, like, so I live in a subdivision, like, and my house, they built it, and it's wired all crazy. I had some electrical problems that, like, a company came out and they were like, yeah, they wired this all messed up, like, because they're just trying to, like, boom and get them out, throw them up and get them out cheapest. And so that's why, like, they have that and they're paying for it, but they're still not making them as great.
Right.
So, but then it's like, how would they look if they didn't have anything?
Right. And, and there are those who would say, and I don't know because I'm not an expert on these things, but there are those that would say that they should be self-regulating, right? And that whole thing, let the buyer beware kind of deal. But I think when people are held to a high standard, if their houses are crappy and shoddy, then people won't buy them and they'll go out of business. Ideally, under the capitalist model, ideally, that's how it should be. I mean, the dollars drive the market, right? And so if people aren't satisfied with the product that you're putting out, then they won't buy it and you'll go out of business. Where regulatory agencies get involved is that they're mandating things, and some of the mandates on their face seem good, but on the other side, they seem oppressive because it's kind of like the carrot and the stick. It's kind of like the slippery slope you're going down sometimes. Once they start regulating one thing, then they regulate something else and else and else and else. And when does it stop? Originally, when you make a good product and you have a good service and you market it well, then people will come to you. And I think we should kind of get back to some kind of middle ground because regulations aren't going to go away. Let's just face it, they're just not. And they're there to protect us, but also they shouldn't be so oppressive that we can't move. And that's one of the problems that we're having right now is that regulatory agencies have become like unelected bureaucracies that are oppressive to people who are trying to move forward in business. A prime example, I work for a non-taxable government agency, like a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Just to do a free event, I had to fill out 9 pieces of paperwork and pay fees to 2 different agencies. And I'm like, but I'm filling the same paperwork out and I'm giving it to you and I'm giving it to you. Do you two talk to each other? And they don't. So when we show up to do our event on the second Saturday of a month, the electricity is supposed to be on, we're supposed to have sound, and we're supposed to have the area clean. Every single month, I have to call somebody to say the electricity isn't on. We don't have sound, and this area is filthy. What's happening? I paid my money. I gave you my paperwork. Help. So these are the kind of things that go in. Agencies don't talk to each other. They're like their own little states sometimes. And it's not a problem that's easily going to be solved, but you have to have somebody who's willing. Because what I'm discovering is people are so used to this dynamic that they're like, well, that's always how it's been, so that's always how we're going to do it. I believe in out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to doing anything and everything. If you've always done it, let's go back and assess why that's working and if it's still working and if it makes sense. Because look at what we're doing right now. It used to be a small segment of people would have the ownership of the airwaves, and they would do the broadcasting. And if you didn't know how to do it, or if you didn't own your own radio station,
you didn't know somebody or
that's
something.
That's right. And you had to pay, right? You had to pay to be on air back in the day. Back in the 1800s, when I went to school, and we talked about owning our own radio station. We talked in Texas, where I went to school. A woman owned couple radio stations out in the boonies, right? She had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the rights to broadcast. And look at you guys now. Here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the freedom that gives you to be able to broadcast. And there are people out there who want to hear what you have to say and what you want to present. And you have the freedom and the flexibility to do it. To me, this is where, free market capitalism is, really roaming free. I mean, it's great. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's what's perfect, like the point you were saying. Stuff's changing, and the regulations or whatever that they've made like way before, like they haven't even gone back to look at them. Just like you said, that's always how it's done it. But like since technology is always evolving, stuff is always evolving. I think laws or regulations, whatever, should be looked at again. To be like, well, we had that, yeah, but that was 50 years ago. I mean, we didn't have internet, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I remember them saying, I think it was Bill Gates that says, oh, well, we're never going to, it's going to top out at a certain point. Well, it blew that totally out of the water. Well, we're going to reach capacity by 1980. Well, 1980 was 40 years ago, right? We've blown past that capacity. There's so many people doing so many things. The technology and the access for just everyday individuals to make their voices heard is so important, and the governmental agencies are not keeping up. They're just not. And I think it's a good thing in some ways, because you guys get to be innovators and you get to set the standard and be trailblazers for those that are coming behind you. Provided that it's a blessing and a curse. In one way, you've got a lot of innovation. You have a lot of people being able to make their stories heard and things being told. But then on the other side, you've got there's always a dark side to these kind of things, where you have things that are not so good being promoted out there. But again, I believe in freedom versus force. We have the opportunity to choose. And so what is going to be the determining factor of success or failure? It's support, it's viewership, it's dollars, it's those things. Those are going to determine who's going to rise to the top and who's going to be, left behind.
Yeah. So what's one of the biggest challenges that you think the city of Aurora, like in Ward 4, has right now that's facing?
Well, again, it's probably safety and security, people feeling safe, and the support of those who protect and serve. And for me, I've lived in my community for over 25 years, and I've seen it change, and sadly, in some ways, not for the better. I'm seeing more car thefts, I saw a guy going into Home Depot, and it made me sad. We're going into Home Depot. This guy, he's got a shopping cart full of tools, and he just runs out the front door with the tools. And the security guards goes to chase him, and he just gives up. And the guy's running with a shopping cart, and he takes off with those tools. One of the things that Aurora is doing now, if you steal $300 worth of property, you spend 3 days in jail.
Really?
Yep. And not only that, you're responsible for taking care of yourself while you're in there. So you don't get a jumpsuit, you wear your own clothes. And you have to take care of yourself while you're in there. I mean, you get fed and stuff, but I mean, it's not like we're going to give you a wardrobe or anything while you're in there. I think when people throw off restraint, then chaos ensues. The consequence and the repercussions of bad behavior because of this whole defund the police narrative hurts us. And it hurts the people who are most vulnerable, which are people in neighborhoods where a Home Depot really matters, where a King Soopers that's being robbed blind, it really matters. Because if they're going to continually get robbed, they're not going to be there anymore. They're going to pack up and they're going to leave. And then you're going to have food deserts, or you're going to have places where people won't be able to get the goods and services that they need, and they're going to have to travel so far out of their community for that. And folks don't seem to understand that. And the second thing I see is that the criminals are younger and younger. We're seeing 15-year-olds,
So do you think that falls kind of on parents, the society, or who if they're younger and younger, I mean, that there has to be a point of where us as parents, we have to take responsibility.
Something's breaking down in the home.
Yes, I totally agree with you. There is a breakdown. It is, you have large single parent households, and even with 2-parent households, it's a struggle. But you're seeing a lot of single parent households, kids getting to the point where, well, if they can do it and there's nothing bad that happens to them, why not me? And we as people, we want to form family groups. We just naturally do that. If we don't have a solid family dynamic that's supported by churches and by community groups and by parents and grandparents, because we're so mobile, you got grandparents living in Missouri, you live here, you don't have that cohesive family unit that supports kids. And they're left to their own devices because mom and dad are working to get the stuff. They want to be able to take them on trips and buy fancy shoes and stuff like that. I remember, back in the 1800s, all I wanted was my dad to be home. I didn't necessarily I didn't have to have fancy shoes and stuff. I just wanted my dad to be around. But you have that breakdown, and it's some of it, I believe, is by design, because the economy is such that both parents have to work. And for me, to bring in well-paying jobs into Aurora is important to support the family, and then to have community organizations and the church to help support the family too. I think these are integral parts. And for me, when I was 15, I got my first job at a Christian camp. Actually, I was 14, and I worked there all summer. $350. That was big money back in the 1800s.
Huh? Oh, yeah.
Plus room and board.
Dang, yeah. Hey, you're balling.
I was balling, But then I worked at GC Murphy, which is kind of like Kmart. Okay. And that was my first actual job. Well, when you look at what kids are doing now, there's no opportunities for them to get jobs. There's no entry-level jobs. If you're paying somebody $18 an hour for an entry-level job, you're not going to look at a teenager that you have to train. Mm-hmm. You're trying to find an adult that you can keep, because sometimes teenagers can only work during the summer, or there's limited hours, and like that, all those constraints around that. And so they're not going to hire a teen. So consequently, what are these teens going to do? I love the idea that we're leaning back more towards vocational programs, teaching kids how to do welding and, auto mechanics and construction and nursing. And, I went to cooking school. I mean, have these kind of things that kids can do, young people can do, to find their niche. I went to Local 208, the Pipe Fitters Union, a couple weeks ago. Man, those guys are amazing. They teach these kids how to do pipe fitting, the fine, a hair. You can put a hair of welding down. I was like, wow, this is amazing. To big things like you could do on ships. And they have an apprenticeship program that you're 18 years old. You either have your high school diploma or GED. They pay you while you're in apprenticeship training. You go for 5 years, and when you're done, you are a journeyman welder or whatever. You're a journeyman, right? Making $100,000 a year with no student debt.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, you need to start back working with their hands again. Because like my background, I was a welder pipe fitter, so I know all that. So I know exactly how it is. And but going back to it was interesting where you were saying about the affordability stuff. Like, yes, I think. I mean, I may be wrong. There's an affordability problem, but also I think we build up a really high lifestyle for ourselves that now we have to have mom and dad work because we want to buy that vacation. Like, well, maybe if you just go somewhere else, you don't have to go fly out.
It's like people start building their own prisons.
Yeah, well,
their expenses start getting way higher than their income is, and then just put it on a credit card, and then oh shit, you still got to go back and pay that credit card debt.
Yeah.
So then the debt just starts amounting to it.
And it does go to like the money affordability, but I think more than a money gap, there's an education gap. Because if they would, I think that's where they're like, the government solution would be like, give them more money, they'll be good. Like, no, they need to give more education so they can, be able to do it. But that's what we're talking about the beginning. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, it's the societal expectations on, what people are seeing like on social media and they think that, well, this is how my life should be. And it's not until you're older that you realize you really didn't need all that crap. Yeah. You just needed to keep your family and your kids together and be happy. You didn't need a lot of stuff.
And a lot of that's fake too.
Is.
If you see it, they just do it. Have you seen? I don't know if you've done it. Like if you guys go out and eat or something, they'll be like, "Let's take a photo." They take a photo and they just smile and then they take it and then they go back to front. Like, you weren't really happy. You were just
making
it
it
for the photo.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to me, from my perspective, a fundamental spiritual deficit that people have. I mean, folks are so unhappy today and their hearts are hurting. And I think that, again, with the breakdown of the family and the community, and exercising or excising the church and the spiritual nature of who we are from that dynamic hurts too, because fundamentally we are spirit beings that live in a body, that have a soul, that long for community. And if we don't have community, we're going to find, if we don't have that filled part of us, we're going to find something to fill it. And it's not always good for us. And when you talk about being, in the affordability perspective, it's like we've bought into this idea that we're supposed to have, the new car, the house, the vacation, 2.5 kids by the time we're 30. I didn't buy my first house until I was 40.
And you're still doing okay.
And I'm still doing okay. I mean, we lived in an apartment. There's nothing wrong with living in an apartment. A home is a home. A home is where your family is. A home is where you can be together and know that you're safe and you're loved and you're protected. That's home.
Yeah. The building, that's just a house.
Yeah.
That's just a house.
It's
but a home is like what you're talking about.
Yeah, but we've bought into the notion that we've got to have designer goods. We've got to look a certain way. We've got to be a certain way. Otherwise, we don't fit in. And so it causes people to do things that are outside their nature. It causes them to do things that, really when things are normal, they just wouldn't do. Why would you risk life or limb to get a thing? But we're told that that's what we need. And so that's where, like, I have 2 grandsons. They're 9 and 10. And when they come to my house, I tell them, okay, screens at the door. No, there will be no screens here. There's no, because they live on their phones. My 2-year-old granddaughter knows how to use the iPhone.
Really?
I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit scared that you know how to do this,
You know how to do it better than I do.
Yes. I asked my grandson, can you fix this? Can you fix this? And it's like, okay, technology is so much a part of our lexicon. It's so much a part of who we are that it's insidious. We don't even know that we never, we didn't have it. See, I'm
from the 1800s.
1800s. See, you're tracking with me. I'm here with, I remember when phones, You know, I remember when phones were this big and only doctors could have them in their car. You know, I mean, your first cell phone was like this big. I mean, I remember the progression from LPs to CDs to, LPs to 8-tracks to cassettes to CDs to digital media. Now everything's in the cloud, But I'm glad to see that, LPs are making a comeback, but I digress. But, technology is such that it's driving us farther away from each other and making us more insular. And that's not necessarily a good thing. We need community. We're just creatures like that. We need each other. And so when people wake up and decide, wait a minute, what's going on here? I don't like it. I don't think this is right. I think we should do something different. That is one of the things that drove me to run for office. I'm like, I don't like what's going on. I'm concerned about how this is going to impact my grandchildren. I want to see them have a world where they can ride up and down the street on their bike and not have to worry about being robbed. I want my mom, who's 85, to be in her apartment and feel safe. I want to have my kids go to school and actually learn how to read, write, and do math. I want our government to be representative of our needs, not us serving them. And I think it's flipped. And so to the extent that we can make that change, we should be about doing it. And it's up to you guys, you guys, young people, and in this place where you're able to, make the call using your social media platform to say, hey guys, you can download the Constitution and have it on your phone. So when somebody says something that you think is wrong, you can look at the documents that founded this country and say, wait a minute, I can do this. I have freedom of speech. I have the right to keep and bear arms. Wait a minute. The proper role of government is to protect individual rights. Are you protecting my individual rights?
Yeah, but Stephanie, that's not as fun as TikTok. That's why they don't do it. It's not that fun. That's the problem. Sadly, that's like the truth. They should, but they just like to be TikTok. They even have a feature now that I guess it can just, once the video finishes, it scrolls by itself. So you don't even have to sit like.
Oh wow.
Well, I feel like a lot of these problems we're talking about here, a lot of it can be solved with improving the family dynamic. Because it reminds me of the story of the not a story, the experiment they did with chimpanzees. They put 5 chimps in a cage and they put a banana on a rope. I don't know if you've heard of it. But it's the chimpanzees, they try to climb the rope, and then once they get the banana, all the other chimps get sprayed with water. So then once it comes down, then they start beating the chimp up. So now every time a banana comes out and one of them tries to climb up to get the banana, the other chimps start dragging it down and beating it up. And then slowly they start changing one chimp at a time for a new chimp. So then eventually it's 5 brand new chimps that every time the banana comes out, they start beating each other up because, they don't really know why they're doing it. They've just been conditioned to do so.
So none of them, the thing is none of them got sprayed with, those last 5, none of them got sprayed with water. Mm-hmm. But since it was just the norm just to beat them up, they were just doing it, and they don't even know why they were doing it.
As soon as they saw the banana, somebody was getting a beat down.
Yeah. And it's with the we were talking about earlier with the government, it's you give them little by little, then eventually our kids are going to grow up in the same kind of just realm, and then they don't even know what's going to be going on eventually. So then they're just going to be taking in, and they're going to be accepting of all this change and all these regulations that the government is putting in.
Well, yeah, when you think about it right now, everybody thinks it's perfectly fine to have no student debt, to have all our debts wiped out. Now, there was a time I joined the military so that I wouldn't have student debt. I gave something to get something. And now the kids are saying, well, the government should just do this. Why should the government just do this? Well, that's all they've ever known, that the government did stuff. So to your point about the chimps, we've been conditioned to accept that the government is going to come and do everything for us. So from cradle to grave, we got free health care, free college, free food, free housing. Everything is free. Well, we have come to understand, anybody who's bought anything from anywhere, nothing is free. If they're saying you get 2 bananas or 2 pieces of cake for $1.99, okay, each piece of cake only costs $1. Or they only cost 25 cents to make.
Yeah.
right? But you're getting it 2 for $1. You're like, whoop, whoop. No, you're paying for both of them.
So
You
like,
just don't realize
buy one,
it.
get one 50% off.
Right. It was only 35% in the first place.
Exactly.
So you're not really getting a bargain. And so why do we think that it's different when it comes to free healthcare, free college, free? Somebody's paying for that, you know?
Yeah, someone's paying for that for sure, because it's not like if they're giving it to you for free, but they're doing it and expecting something in return. Like, you know, you got to do, okay, we'll give you all this, just remember, you know. Just remember, you know, when it comes around.
And it's funny how they start doing that around election time.
Oh, yes.
That's the best.
Here's all this free stuff. But, I mean,
Remember me on November 7th.
Exactly.
And you'll keep getting that free stuff, kiddo. We're going to make sure you keep getting it.
There'll be a lot more free stuff coming up in the next year.
Yeah. Be on the lookout. Subscribe to their newsletter.
Right. And when this free stuff has been tried in other parts of the world, and it eventually is, like you said, Ponzi scheme, is unsustainable. Somebody's going to pay for it. The whole thing is going to collapse, and then we're going to have anarchy.
Yeah.
Or you do give it up, but then you have no freedom after that. You are getting all these perks and stuff, if you want to call it like that. But then at the end of the day, it's like, who's controlling your life?
Indeed.
I was going to say, on the stuff that they do get for free from the government stuff, I don't know if it should be for free, but I think it should be available for everybody, is to a certain extent, of course, is like healthcare. Because I don't think you should be, if you're part of society, you're a taxpayer and stuff, I don't think you should be compromised to not be able to even get the applicable adequate healthcare, and then you're just like, oh, I guess you're just on death's door now because you can't afford it.
That's the key word, though. You said is if you're part of society, if you're doing your due diligence, paying your taxes, contributing to society.
Yeah, if you're not contributing,
you're not just here collecting unemployment, give me my money.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You got to be able to contribute.
Yep. I believe in needs-based testing for that. I mean, if you're working and, you know, I think we had a classmate who ran his own private practice, and it was based on you became part of this practice, and you paid into it, and whatever you needed, you got taken care of because you were paying what it actually cost. See, we really don't understand, and I worked for a major healthcare carrier for 10 years as in sales. So when you look at how much healthcare actually costs and all the fees and things they put on it, because they got to make the money for the people that aren't paying. So the rest of us who can pay are paying not only for us but for them. And so when you make it what it actually was, see, I'm old enough to remember, one, my doctor lived in our neighborhood. Two, he lived in a house and his practice was downstairs, right? So when we went to see him, we paid $35 to see him for our annual whatever we needed to do. And then if there was anything else, then we paid for it a la carte like that. When my daughter was born, you know, they didn't have Kaiser or anything like that. When I went to the doctor, I paid $35 a visit. If she needed any more services, then I would pay for those services. Like she had strep throat or whatever, I would pay for those things, the actual cost. So what we're looking at right now, so the average office visit should be about $50. But because of the mandates, it's actually they're charging like $200. Okay, and so by the time they send it to the insurance carriers, that's why they have these so-called deep discounts. It's not. You're paying $200 that they're billing, but at the end of the day, you're still paying that $50. But the doctor is charging the government $200. You know, so you don't really see how much it's actually charging. If they got back to paying for services, direct services, you would see this whole thing collapse. But because there are lots of folks making money off of this, it's going to be hard to make it collapse. But to your point, I agree that, you know, means testing and fee-based services should be the standard. And if people want to break out like Forward is a practice where people pay into it. And our classmate, he has a practice that you can pay into. And I think there are going to be people that are going to start doing that more. But the sad thing is that the folks on the bottom that are making minimum wage, they may not be able to access that. So to me, it would be important for the government, and they're never going to get out of healthcare, but to make it easier for people to access those services and not charge the exorbitant over fees to make it seem like it's more than it actually is. And that sounds kind of convoluted, but having worked in the industry, I understand how they bill. And when they bill it like that, it makes it really hard. And because of all the extra maintenance on top of it, it makes it super expensive, because healthcare itself should not be expensive. You should not be paying, $300 for a medication that only costs $2 to make.
Yeah, it's because it's the whole thing. They charge the insurance. The hospital charges the insurance. Insurance charges somebody else, and it just kind of it's the
You're being charged 5 times at 5 different price points at 5 different places for a drug that only costs $3 to make. But when they realize it's more lucrative to keep you sick than make you healthy, eat good food, exercise, drink more water, stop smoking. But I agree, freedom versus force. So if you're gonna drink, smoke, and do that kind of stuff, but there's a consequence to that, and It is, but we've got to try it. We've got to try something else, because what we're doing right now is not working. And that's the thing. What is the will of people to try something new? To your point about the experiment, if people get so used to things being the way they are, it's going to be really difficult to have them try something different. It's going to take forward thinkers like you guys, and others that will say, you know what, that's not working. Let's do this. And if enough of you do that, then it will move the ball forward, and it can be revolutionary. I'm here for it.
Having change, making change sounds all good. Like we're all like everybody agrees to it when they're just talking to each other. Because we know like one big way to start this, it's not going to happen all at once, but it starts with voting into like the new elections and stuff. It sounds all good when people are talking, but then when time comes to push comes to shove, time to go vote, people don't go show
They
out.
need to go vote. And here's the thing.
How do we get people to go out?
because it's coming soon.
It is coming soon. November 7th is the elections for Aurora, and there have been some huge changes, like the Denver election just happened. And it's kind of sad. Only 35% of the voting populace turned out. 35%.
That's crazy.
35%.
What?
Because, and people are saying, well, I'm just tired. I'm tired. So
Is it people not being informed of like when elections are, who's running,
right,
or how to vote?
And
or the times to go vote. Like we're talking about remember, like the government stuff. Like sometimes it's only at a certain hours, or say if you go vote and there's like a long line.
Right.
It's only 10 to 5, but
Right.
then I get out of work at 5, so then I can't go.
right. And see, back in the day, not very long ago, Tuesday was the voting day. You had a right as a citizen of this country, and no employer could keep you from going to exercise your civil right. And now that we have all these mail-in ballots, there's no excuse for people not voting. Here's the thing, though, is that a lot of people don't even know who they're voting for, and it's incumbent upon you as a citizen of this country, whether you own property, whether you don't own property, it doesn't matter. You are a citizen of this country. It's incumbent upon you to find out who you're voting for. Don't just vote for somebody because they're a Democrat, or don't just vote for somebody because they're a Republican. Don't vote. All politics is local, okay? Because the people who are voting for people who are in municipal elections, like for the city, for the council, for these small pockets. Folks are saying, I hate Trump or I hate Biden. Biden and Trump don't know you from a can of paint. What is happening is what's happening on your city council. You need to know what they're doing, what their position is, what their track record is. If they're incumbents, if they're running for re-election, let's see what they did last time around. Did they do what was in our best interest, or did they do what was in theirs? Because these civil servants, these people who are elected, they work at your good pleasure. And see, people forget that. They are your voice on the council. So let's find out, what are they doing? Did they pass an ordinance that helped you or hurt you? Are they bringing economy in, or are they driving it out? Did they defund the police or did they strengthen the police? You know, and Aurora is a unique city because it's a home rule city, and the city council hires the city administrator or the city manager, and he in turn works with the Civil Service Commission to hire the police chief and, you know, like that. But and the mayor, and they kind of work in concert, which I think is really good because all the power isn't on one person. And I think the balance is kind of like our national government. You got the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. Lately, I'm questioning whether they're all working independently, but I digress. But at the local level, that's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be balanced. And so that's why it's really important that when you vote on November 7th, you know who you're voting for. And not just the personality. You might not like a person's personality, but what are their policies? Are their policies good, solid policies that will help move our community forward? Or are they just about smiling and waving? We don't need any more smiling and waving and saying, come on, man. We don't need any more come on, man. We need somebody to say, look, Aurora needs more police. They need to be better trained. They need to be supported. They need to be protected. If they're bad apples, they need to be removed. And they not only should be removed, but they shouldn't be allowed to be on anybody's police force anywhere. Not just shift them from one place to another, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that going on. And when you look at cops and the work that they do, my nephew's a cop, and when you think of the thankless work that these cops do and the high level of stress that they're under, it is important to make sure they're continually supported and trained. And if they're involved in anything like a shooting or anything like that, then they need a period of time to get their mind back. Because if you're involved in a traumatic situation, are you going to get up and go to work the next day? Probably not. But we expect cops to do that. And they're just people. They're people. So let's start treating these folks with the dignity and the respect that they deserve because they're out there. And if we're not taking care of these cops who take care of us, who protect us, the people who are the most hurt are people who look like you and me. We're the ones getting hurt. So we've got to step up and we got to stand up and stand behind them, and hold people accountable. I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's nothing. Doesn't sound like anything out of the norm that should be. But so where could people find you to learn a little bit more about you as this comes down?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. You can go to my website, Stephnie4Aurora.com, Stephnie4Aurora.com. And if you want to know more about the Aurora Cultural Arts District, you can go to auroraculture.org. That's the nonprofit.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, we'll put the links down in the description for people to check out for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You guys make my heart happy because I really love the work that you're doing, and I hope it just like blows up and goes far and wide, and because you're good guys.
We appreciate it. No,
I appreciate you taking the drive all the way down here and joining us for a little bit.
It was a scenic drive, but it's good. I think it's important to keep the message going and keep talking.
We got to. Yeah. No, respect for all the stuff you stand for. And best of luck on your elections coming soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate
So guys, all the links to our website and all that stuff are going to be down in the description. But guys, thank you guys tuning in to the podcast where an active brilliant is the question. We'll check you guys out on the next one.
Okay. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.